Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I be a
The
slave,
Civil Rights Movement was a movement led by
I'll be
Dr. Martin
buried
Luther King Jr.
in my
in the
grave
1950s and 60s that accounted for
and go
equality of colored
home
people among the white.
to
It
my
was a movement that
Lord
tried to outlaw any racial activity in
and
the United
be
States.
free.
This image is showing racial discrimination to the colored people by
Oh,
separating them from the white
freedom.
people. This is Dr.
Oh,
King giving his famous
freedom.
"I Have a Dream" speech at the Washington Monument on
Oh,
August 28,
freedom
1963.
over
This was one of the most
me.
historic and famous speeches given in our
And
nation's history.
before
More than
I
250,000
be a
blacks and whites
slave,
gathered together to hear what Dr. King
I'll be
had to say.
buried in my grave
As you
and
can
go
see, this is an
home
image of the timeline
to
for the
my
Civil Rights Movement.
Lord
This image shows
and
key
be
events that
free.
shaped the Civil Rights Movement and led to the
And
passing of the Civil
before
Rights
I
Act in 1964.
be a
Though there were
slave,
many more, these are just some of the
I'll be
historic events
buried
that led our nation to where
in
it is
my
today
grave
in regards to racial
and
discrimination.
go home.
Life for a colored man or woman
Oh,
in the South
freedom.
during the 1950s and 60s was a hard life. There was slavery,
Oh,
segregation, and hate
freedom.
pressured upon them, and it was all because of the color of their skin.
Oh,
There were
freedom
colored towns and white towns,
over
colored
me.
schools and white schools, colored restrooms and white restrooms,
And
colored seats on the bus
before I
and white seats.
be a
The list
slave,
could go on and on.
I'll
And
be
if a colored
buried
person even dared to
in my
fight back,
grave
that would be the end of it for him or her.
and go
Life
home
for a colored man was awful,
to
and
my
I don't think we can
Lord
fully understand it unless we were
and
there to
be
experience it
free.
firsthand. In this image, you can see the hurt upon her face.
Oh,
The only thing
freedom.
colored people wanted was freedom.
Oh, freedom.
This is one of the most famous pictures
Oh,
in American history.
freedom
Many of you know
over
who
me.
Rosa Parks is, but do you know what she is known for?
And
According to
before
Biography.com,
I
Rosa Parks was a
be a
civil rights
slave,
activist who refused to
I'll
surrender her
be
bus seat to a
buried
white passenger,
in
spurring the
my
Montgomery
grave
bus boycott and other
and
efforts
go
to end
home
segregation. She was
to
put in
my
jail for standing up
Lord
for herself and her fellow
and be
African
free.
Americans.
And before I
Like it says,
be a
Rosa Parks' movement
slave,
led to the Montgomery bus boycott.
I'll be
According
buried
to History.com, the
in
Montgomery
my
bus
grave
boycott, in which African Americans
and
refused
go
to ride
home
city buses in Montgomery, Alabama,
to my
to protest
Lord
segregated seating, took place from
and
December
be
5, 1955 to December 20th,
free.
1956, and is regarded as the first large-scale demonstration against segregation in the United States. Because of the bus boycott, the bus
Oh,
businesses were not
freedom.
getting as much money or business as they needed, and after a series of events with the Supreme
Oh,
Court and federal
freedom.
courts, History.com states that Montgomery's buses were integrated
Oh,
on December
freedom
21st, 1956, and the
over
boycott
me.
ended. It had lasted 381
And
days.
before I be a slave,
This
I'll
is an
be
image of
buried
President Johnson
in
signing
my
the Civil
grave
Rights Act of 1964,
and
and
go
as you can
home
see, Dr. Martin Luther King
to
Jr.
my
is standing right
Lord
behind him. The signing of the
and
Civil
be
Rights Act was a
free.
defining moment in the history of America. As stated in the origins and
Oh,
legacy of the Civil
freedom.
Rights Act of 1964, the Civil Rights Act of
Oh,
1964 was a watershed moment in
freedom.
American history. Its passage summarily outlawed the
Oh,
systemic, far-fetching,
freedom
and in some cases,
over
legally
me.
sanctioned discrimination that had prevailed for decades
And
across a number
before
of areas
I
of American
be
society.
a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free.